Is Four Roses LE worth the hunt in 2024? Let's find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So I am very excited to be diving into Four Roses limited edition small batch for 2024. This is by far the most special bottle that I've been able to get my hands on from Four Roses. I was lucky enough to be down at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival a couple of weeks ago, right when Four Roses decided to drop this at their distillery. So I was able to get up pretty early one morning and make sure I got a bottle, which is awesome. Every year, this LE batch comes out from Four Roses. What's the story here? Well, we all know that Four Roses has 10 different recipes, which means they can offer a ton of variety to consumers, which is great. But in this limited edition small batch they do every year, they typically combine about 4 to 5 of their recipes, usually at pretty high ages, to create a very unique and extremely special blend of their stuff. So this year in particular is not bucking that trend. There's some really well-aged and awesome whiskey in here. I'm at least anticipating that it's going to be great based on the stats. So I actually took some notes. Let me grab those so I can break it down for you. So yes, let's break it down. The Four Roses limited edition 2024 small batch. What goes into this blend? Got 39% is a 16-year-old OESF. The E, the second letter, tells you how much rye is in the mash bill. That's the lower rye mash bill. 31% is a 12-year OBSV. That's the higher rye. It's actually their standard recipe for their single barrel, which I think is awesome. When I tasted all 10 in the little kit they made last year, OBSV actually won out for me. It was my favorite recipe. 23% of it is a 15-year-old OESK, and 7% of it is a 20-year OBSV. So definitely some significant age, good blend of different offerings there. Proof point here on this particular bottle is 108.2 proof, so relatively low proof for a barrel strength offering, which it is. But, you know, if you ask me, somewhere in that 107 to 115 range is usually an awesome proof point. Last but not least, price point here is where we start getting a little, disappointed with how much it's going to hit our wallet, and it's $220 MSRP. You likely will see it marked up quite a bit more on secondary. Part of the reason is this really is quite a limited product. It says right on the back of the bottle that only 16,680 bottles of this were made. So compare that to something like Russell's Reserve 15, which the rumor is about maybe 80,000 bottles. We're talking about Four Roses, definitely more limited, much harder to find. So the question becomes, how good is this blend? How good is this whiskey? It's the most special thing from Four Roses that you can get every year. Let's see if it holds up to all the hype. This is the first Four Roses LE that I have ever gotten my hands on. So super happy to add it to the collection, but want to see if it can live up to what everybody says about it. All right, so on the nose here. Ooh, nice. Very fruity. The fruits are kind of going in multiple different directions though. Like I'm getting a strawberries and cream kind of note, but also a blackberry plum, rich, dark fruit kind of experience. So I've had a couple of pours of this, and the most fascinating thing on the nose for me so far has been a little bit of a tropical flair to this. It's more of a coconut, very interesting note. I think it kind of blends in with that strawberries and cream, but there's a coconutiness. Some oak for sure, don't want to neglect that. There's big oak here. And then some tobacco and some aged presence for sure. It's dense. It doesn't smell hot. It smells kind of cool and dense and fruity, like jam and that strawberries and cream. It isn't jumping out of the glass a ton. I feel like I have to dig into it. It's complex. It's offering an array of different notes, but it isn't in your face, that's for sure. Okay, so let's go in on the palate, see how it holds up. It's a very good nose. All right, cheers everybody. That's good. It's kind of a roller coaster as well. Long, developing, unfolding sip. Lots of complexity to break down. So the front end, I got some of that darker fruit, like that blackberry plum experience. Mid palate, big wave of oak. Some good spice kicks up for sure. And then the back end of the palate starts to get a little sweeter. I get more of that strawberries and cream, that coconutty creaminess as well kicks in. Very interesting. But then the finish, the very end of the sip, goes right back to that oak and more of the tobacco aged presence for sure. So it really takes you on kind of a developing ride. All right, now that I've got it on the palate, let's go in for a second sip and see if we can pick out some more flavors, even though this is already quite complex. All right, cheers. Yeah. I basically want to break this sip down into 3 different categories here. We've got fruit, we've got spice, and we've got aged notes. So on the fruit, it's carrying over from the nose. More of that blackberry and plum. And I will note there's a little bit of an acidity that comes with that. So just not exactly fully sweet all the way through. There's a little bit of an acidity. You match that with some of the tannic age notes like the tobacco and the oak, and you get something that's not the most mellow sip. There's some edge to it. But then you introduce some of the other fruits. You've got like the strawberries and cream thing. Spiciness wise, it's a nice mellow spice all the way throughout. You've got kind of a rye kick, but then more of a cigar box aged spice, especially toward the back end of the palate and into the finish, which is nice. And then again, you got those aged notes. You've got tobacco, oak for sure, and just a touch of leather, I think, on the back end. I think the age kind of takes over the sip by the time you get to the finish. Speaking of the finish, let's go in on the palate for the 3rd time. I'll really track the whole experience, but we'll focus on the finish and then talk about this overall and whether or not it's justifying its price and limited nature. All right, cheers. Yeah, the nose is actually really interesting, and that tropical flair is building, which is cool. All right, cheers. Yeah. I think the best thing about this whiskey is how much it just kind of unfolds as you sit there and let it sit on your palate. So that 3rd sip, I'm always really focused on the overall experience and then thinking about that finish. And the finish is long here. It's got this really interesting blend of that creaminess. So the mouthfeel here is really nice, but then you get that coconut creaminess, strawberries and cream kind of thing. Is sweetens up about 2/3 into the sip, and that lingers on the palate for a while. But then you get those aged notes, so much tobacco on this, and some of that oak and spice sticks around, but it's really that dark tobacco-y experience and some of that brighter sweetness that comes in for me. Really interesting, but it does linger for a while. And again, on the front end, I got more of those dark berries, the fruits of like blackberry and plum, mid-palate spice and oak, back end, some brighter sweetness, but then that dark, rich tobacco and some of the oak as well. So really complex, kind of takes you for a ride. The nose is very interesting and intriguing and kind of different. And then the palate delivers a lot of complexity. Is it worth the $220 and maybe the hunt you'd have to go on to get it? Well, I will say this. It's definitely the best Four Roses product I've ever had. I've had multiple different single barrels that are really, really good for around $100, but this is much more complex. Those tend to go in one direction for me, so you get a lot of fruit and spice, or you'll get more of an herbal thing, but they won't have tons of complexity because they're just one of the recipes. This definitely brings an array of flavors, so big points for that. Finish is really long and really nice, which is the mark of a great whiskey in my opinion. I don't think I would pay any more than the $220 I paid for it, though. I do think it's a really good, complex, special whiskey, but I don't think it's worth chasing the way people tend to on the secondary market or go crazy for this or charge way more than MSRP. I think it kind of maxes out at that like $220 range. So very, very good, deserving of its special nature, but kind of sits maybe where I'd say the ceiling is for me in terms of MSRP. One thing I did want to note here is this will be going into my Whiskey of the Year bracket. It is definitely deserving of that. My suspicion, though, is it might not do as well in that bracket, and I don't think that means it's a bad whiskey by any means. I just tend to think that complexity isn't always going to shine the most in a blind. This, I guess, would lead me to say that this is not a in-your-face whiskey. This is a whiskey you got to sit with and break apart and enjoy that way. I don't think it jumps out of the glass on the nose. I don't think the palate overwhelms you with a wave of flavor. I think it takes you on a ride, but you got to kind of pay attention while you're sipping on it, and it's not just going to be in your face. Part of that might be the lower proof, part of that's just the complexity of the blend, but it's definitely more of a thinker of a whiskey and kind of a sophisticated, complex pour. Hope that helps you navigate it, whether or not this is worth chasing. Four Roses limited edition, very, very difficult to get. I was just lucky enough to be down there when they released it. So I would love to know in the comments below, have you had a Four Roses limited edition small batch? What did you think of it? What's your experience been with this release? And then if you have tasted the 2024, what do you think, and where does it fit in your ranking of maybe other Four Roses LEs? I think that's going to do it, everybody. While you're still here, would appreciate if you'd hit the like button on the video. That's what gets it out to the most people. And then if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Bourbon Hutch for the rest of 2024 and beyond. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.